Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on cybersecurity for small business and for mums and dads. I'm Jacqui Brauman with TBA Law, and I've got Solo Kombani with me. Solo and I did a few presentations for Agricultural Victoria together, so I have seen him in action, and this will be really, really valuable for you. Solo is the Chief Operating Officer, is that right, at Aiculus?
Yep.
Yeah. So a background in finance and cybersecurity, and Aiculus has developed AI that helps recognize when something looks sus. Is that a good description?
That is a good description. Yeah, and especially on platforms.
Yeah. But you're also very generous with your time, and also try to give lots of tips about how people can do things for free to protect themselves. So Solo, take it away.
Sure. So hi everyone, and it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. One thing I would say is I was really impressed, and that I guess that's the beautiful thing about working with businesses that really care about their clients. This is something that was, Jacqui's idea. She brought it up. She's like, hey, could you come talk to the good folks at TBA Law? So, having worked in a few places, you don't always see folks that go out there and try and get really useful stuff for their clients. Other lawyers would just sit there and be like, wait till they get hacked. All right. So it's really good to be, working with businesses that do care about their clients. So about Aiculus itself, Aiculus is about 10 years of hands-on experience, and we've all sort of come from different industries and departments, industries and organizations. And we came together as an organization about 4 years ago, right? So what we really do is we help customers, especially those in the small, medium area who maybe don't get the sort of help that large enterprises have the budget to do, to come up with cost-effective cybersecurity frameworks and to really empower them across the risk and compliance to understand that. So in terms of who we are a company that specializes in cybersecurity. We do some AI and help people with that sort of stuff. But really, we strive to be a trusted partner in terms of cybersecurity needs. And we believe that at the end of the day, cyber is more about individuals and people than it is about computers. And we'll sort of get into that too as we go through the slides. So in terms of today, I wanted to kind of, have a bit of a collaborative session with everyone to find out what you folks would love to get out of the session. There's some stuff that I'm definitely going to cover, but just so I know what to tilt towards and so forth. The first area will be why cybersecurity matters and why it's crucial that we should all care. The third part there will be common attacks that we see and have been discussed, and there'll be a reference link there where you can go on Australian government side and get more information. Cyber is really about having reputable sources as well, right? Then we're going to talk about what can we do about it. So instead of feeling all helpless and feeling like, it's too big of a problem to solve, what are some things that we can do to dramatically increase our cyber resilience and to dramatically ensure that we're not soft targets for hackers? And then on the blue side, there is stuff that we're going to do together. So we'll be able to pull together some final thoughts, have a discussion. And one of the things I was hoping we could do there is come up with a list of tips and tricks that you folks as clients and partners of TBA Law think would be relevant to you all. So I thought that would be a nice collaborative discussion instead of me saying, here's some things for you to go and see, right? Because you guys are the experts on your situations and so forth. And then finally, we'll have some Q&A. I'm not too bothered if you have questions as we go, but just to make sure that we get to the full entirety of the presentation, and that I guess we're not addressing things that come up later. Do feel free as well to sort of write down those questions and we can discuss them at the end. That said, if there's something that you think is going to block your understanding as we go, I would rather you sort of bring it up than kind of, get lost in what's going on. So I'll pause there for a second. Any questions or comments? I'm not sure, Jacqui, whether everyone...
Yeah, everyone has access to the chat. So just let us know if you're having any difficulty seeing slides or hearing anything.
Yeah.
And yeah, pop your questions in there and I'll interrupt solo when there's something relevant.
Okay, easy. And then I guess the first thing as we go is just goals for the session. If you can think about what you would love to get out of it. If there's, I guess, questions that you came with, feel free to put them in the chat as well. And then maybe what we can do at that final discussion is sort of check in on those goals and make sure that everyone's goals have been met. Yeah. So cybersecurity, why does it matter? Right. I just hopped online and picked up a few headlines. These are all from this year within the last couple of weeks. So you can see here that hackers are using child, exploitation images to get your, account banned by Facebook, and then it's easier for them to reset it, right? So right from the get-go, what I've done is I'm just really trying to show you how it's a common problem across everything, right? And what people do is they look at the rules and the systems in place and they find mischievous ways, or they find, unscrupulous ways to gain access to what is yours. So here's another one. This is during the lockdown, right? This is people being at home and just doing what they're doing. Almost 1 in 5 Australians, right? So if you think about, and you got to remember, some people will talk about it, some people will be too ashamed, and some people will not know, right? So if you look at that, this is kind of happened through passwords. So something to think about there. This article was 2 weeks ago, and Australians losing a record 211 million in scams, right? And then this gentleman here actually worked in IT, right? He worked in information technology. He'd worked for a long time, and there's a really good there's a good profile. You can see they did a story on him on ABC, but basically he worked in IT for a very long time. He got towards the end, he was getting towards the end of his career. Him and his wife decided to invest 200,000 in JP Morgan. You'd say that's a pretty reputable company with a big name. They were sent some links, which they clicked on, and they spoke to some very posh sounding British folks, and before you know it, the 200K was gone. In fact, the only way they found out is when his wife went to call the scammers up, the number came up as flagged on her Google phone, right? So what I'm trying to say with this is it's not mugs that are getting done by cyber. It's not silly people. It's everyday people. And the whole thing is based on manipulating our sense of trust and our need to help. You see a big brand, you think, oh, I'm not being scammed, and then you turn off your red flags, okay? And then even for people trying to settle into Australia, just newly arrived. And basically what I'm trying to say is nobody is safe, right? And I don't say that to scaremonger, but I say that to say if we're prepared, then we can better defend ourselves against these things. So basically why cyber matters for me is it's about people, right? It's at the end of the day, it's about us being able to enjoy our retirement, be able to keep the money that we've worked hard for, being able to just do what we intend to do without other people interfering. So I'll pause there for a bit and just sort of let everyone digest. But at the bottom there, we've got a wonderful resource that's run by the Australian government that you can kind of jump into and see a whole lot more. So what I've pulled out are some of the family ones. They've also got risks for small and medium enterprises. I really recommend that as a good resource to check and get reputable, really good information, right? It's not all the information in the world, but it's a good place to start. So common cyber threats. And as we go through them, I really want everyone to think about what's at the bottom of what hackers are trying to get, right? And I think that there's not that many options when it comes to that. So one is good old-fashioned data spill. Jacqui, I didn't click into the chat because I'm just not sure what it is. So please feel free to interrupt me if it's urgent. Yeah. Just sort of mess up the slide. So a data spill is something, and maybe some of you have experienced this. It happened to me. I took a holiday about, this is way pre-COVID when we used to enjoy holidays. I took a holiday, and while I was away, I'd used my card to book, and something like 6 months later, I found that booking.com had been hacked and the data had been spilled, right? Now, data spills are really bad because what can happen is by no fault of yours, a service that you're using can be hacked and your username and passwords can be revealed, or sensitive data like your credit card accounts and credit card numbers and so forth. So data spills happen a lot. Not every company will disclose these. Not every country reinforces them. I think Australia has a threshold as to at what point do you need to disclose that this has happened. But even with the big tech giants, it happens with your Googles, your Microsofts, and so forth. So it's good every now and then to just kind of have a look, especially where you've got sensitive information sitting, to just check if a data spill has happened. Malicious insiders are people that you trust and love, or fallen out with. It could be someone that you work with. It could be, an old spouse or a friend you're estranged with. But basically, it's people that know you, or someone that you just trust and decides to steal from you, right? Or in some cases, a financial advisor and so forth. So it is important with insiders to not just give over everything and close your eyes, to also be in a situation where you can really assess whether all your data is in place and everything is where it should be, right? So we hear many times about people being scammed, and by the time, the police trying to catch on, the person's overseas. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with cyber is, back in the day, crime was done by people in your locale and you could go find them. And these days it's done by kids in a basement out of anywhere, right? It could be in Africa, it could be in Asia, it could be in Australia. You just never know. And you never know whether there'll be the right jurisdiction to resolve such a thing. The third one there is scams. I'm not covering them in order, but usually scams are interesting because they're usually going directly for your money, or they're usually trying to put you in a position where, you're paying money for someone to show up at an airport, they don't, or there's been really sad cases of where people are lured overseas and they find out they're carrying drugs and they didn't know. So for me, scams are really the area where I'd love everyone to be really paying attention to, because they also deal with matters of, the heart. They can damage your confidence and your sense of intelligence. Some of these, I'm sure everyone has received calls lately, especially after June, from the tax office. And sometimes you can tell because people don't sound like they're from the tax office, right? Someone's name is John Wayne, but you can tell that they're not John Wayne. But the scam we were talking about before with JPM, that was done by very effective people who spoke beautiful English with very posh accents, right? And it's still very hard to track down. So scams is something that we need to be aware of. But usually, the worst part about scams is you are exploiting people's helpfulness. So you're exploiting people's vulnerability, right? So that's something just to be aware of. If you're about to make some big decisions, a scammer will normally isolate you. They'll put a bit of urgency to what you're doing. So for me, with all these things, talk to a family member, talk to a friend, get their opinion, and don't be making moves or doing things for people that you haven't actually met and seen in person. I know people say there's Skype. There's all these things called deep fakes now where they can put a fake image and fake an accent. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we stick to the old school that we know, which is just human to human contact, good to go, right? So, and by way of a quick example, last week I had a call. So I'd moved houses, and it looks like when I updated my addresses everywhere, I forgot to update them at Fines Victoria. So I had a parking fine, and the guy called me and he's like, "Can you confirm who you are so I can talk to you?" And I said, "I don't know who you are," right? And he says, "Well, I'm calling from Fines Victoria." And I was like, "Well, I don't know." So he said, "Look, here's your case number. Call this number, confirm, and make sure it's me." So those are some of the things that we can do around that, and we'll kind of talk into that later. But don't be shy to push back and say, "I don't know who you are, therefore I can't give you my information," because that normally spills into that other point there around identity theft. Phishing is a funny one because they do use phishing terminology. They call it a law. So normally you might get an email from ANZ saying, "Hey, your password expired," whether or not you're customer of ANZ. And as soon as you click that and you put your details in, it's gone, right? They've got your login and they're going to go in there, change your password and access your stuff. So one thing you'll notice here is there's always a sense of urgency. There's always a bit of, you're in trouble. You need to act now. And truth of the matter is, if you just rewind back to, even 5-10 years ago, the debt collectors will come get you. Someone will call you if it's that urgent, right? It's not going to be someone on the phone asking for large sums of money. So just something to think about there. These also happen on WhatsApp, on Telegram. Greg Hunt's phone was hacked on Telegram through a link that he clicked. So what I'm trying to say is, we love the forwards. We love all the Facebook stuff that's coming through, but just be super careful what you're clicking. If your bank really wants you to do something, you don't have to just click on a link. You can normally call them and have that chat. And then real quick, hacking. I think hacking is the one that maybe everyone's sort of scared of. Usually the impression is someone's got some sort of machine and they're typing away and they get your username and password. But hacking in the simplest form just means getting access to something you should not have access to. And usually it's through all these other channels, right? It'll be a data spill somewhere, and then someone sees, oh, you log into your Hotmail with this username and whatever. Let me try that on your banking, as an example. Let me try that on your Facebook. So malicious insiders as well, same. What I'm trying to say is most of the ways in which we are hacked is not someone guessing our password. Well, it could be if your password's your maiden name or your first child's name or your footy team's name, right? But most of this hacking that is brute force or mechanical would actually cause your system to shut down. So most hacking, so your password would expire and stuff like that. And you probably sometimes see that. But what I'm trying to get to is hacking sort of encompasses all this stuff, which is if I can get your credentials and your data, then I'm in. Right. So just a quick overview. There's more information on these on CyberGov, but I'm telling you these just so you kind of know the difference and you can sort of start to navigate the cyber landscape. So what are they after and why do people bother to hack you? Right. So they either have a data or information. So you probably heard in the news, Australia was being hacked a lot. And it's still happening this year and last year, government services, IP universities, and so forth. At the individual level, it's usually someone trying to get data that might either be sensitive and embarrass you, or they want to, put it online and extort you. It could be just your usernames and your logins. In Singapore last year, they had the Prime Minister's health records get hacked, and you sit there and you wonder why. It's because your bank balance will change week to week. Your health records are your health records, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is this data and information, and we're all very different. We might have sensitive data that we're keeping that should be kept out of other people's hands. So something to think about there. Usually that data might be for the sake of money, and sometimes it's not, all right, or resources, or leveraging it to blackmail you, or selling it on the dark web. So there are some people out there that will hack computers. They'll put all the credit card numbers on the dark web and people will buy those. And that's kind of where they use their thing. So what is the point of all this? I think if we know what they're after, then it's easier for all of us to kind of look at where is my sensitive data and information? Where is my money, whether it be your super, your pension, your house, whatever. Where are my most valuable assets? And how do I make sure that they're protected? So I'll give you an example. I might use social media. I don't worry too much if someone gets into my social media because it has nothing to do with my banking. So by realizing what hackers are after, we can start to have advantage because a lot of time they don't know what they're looking for, right? So any questions before I continue? Should I pause there for a bit and give everyone a break?
It's silence in the chat.
Beautiful.
I think they're following and I think they're just like,
oh. All right. So what can we do? And I say this because this is where all of us have an advantage of a hacker. A hacker is an opportunist, right? So if I have to spend $1,000 to get $100 out of you, I'm probably not going to do it. But if I can spend $100 and get $10,000 out of you, that's better than me trying to hack the Commonwealth Bank or Westpac and so forth. So with that in mind, our job is to make it as frustrating and as difficult as possible, because after a while, it doesn't make business sense for them to keep coming after you, right? So one thing you might want to do is if it's you as an individual, or it's you as a business, or it's you with a partner or the family, sit down and take stock of all your key assets and any other sensitive data. So you are the best qualified person to kind of go, hey, we've got a house over here, the title deeds over here, we've got some shares over here, or we've got money in this account and in that account. And you can start to sit there and almost have an inventory of all the things you need to protect. What this also means is you can start to create air blocks between things. You can start to say, hey, this is the account I used to buy online, and I want to separate that from my family's life savings or from my life savings, right? And therefore, if that card gets compromised, my savings are going to be fine. But starting with that just gives you so much power to be able to move forward. The second point there is run through scenarios of what might happen if you got hacked. And by this, I mean, we do this all the time. We practice first aid, we do building drills to go downstairs. And the reason why that stuff is effective, the reason why, we train in sport and we practice different things is under pressure, your body and your mind is very good at putting things on autopilot, right? So once you've done it before, you can just hop in the car and drive and kind of sometimes oh, how did I turn around here and navigate traffic? Your mind just likes to put things on autopilot. So the more you think about what could happen if I got hacked, the more you can think about it under calm circumstances, the more you can prepare for it, the more you can have a plan, the more you can segregate your stuff and be in a better position than if it happened. I think the worst part is most people are caught off guard, right? So you set a plan in place and show all the relevant people are in on the plan. So I'll just give a quick example. A few years ago, I was just at home and my auntie had gone traveling with their new partner. And I remember they had gone, I think they'd traveled somewhere. I think they'd gone to Serbia to meet his side of the family and whatever. And soon after they left, I got a message on Facebook saying, hey, I'm no name, no nothing. I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm stuck in the Philippines. We got robbed. Please help get us home. Right. And I remember texting on WhatsApp and her saying, no, that did not happen. But this person had taken over her Facebook, such that when I replied on email, the person replied on email and said, yes, it's me. Right. So I then tried WhatsApp, and that's how I found it wasn't her. So by that, I mean, if you as a family have a plan, or your closest contacts that would ask you for money, whether you have a safe word or this or that you kind of, but I guess what I'm trying to say is to just have a fire drill or plan in place. That'll save you so much time, right? And then you kind of want to revisit that plan once or twice a year. So you are in the best position to decide whether, the things that you want to protect are kind of super sensitive or they're not. But the other thing is it's good at least once a year to be looking at your password and thinking about, should I change it? Has it been your footy team for the last 20 years? And I say that because the longer you've had a password in place, the more likely that it's been spilled somewhere through data. There's a really good website that I think you can all check out, but I'll send a link because it's one of those that if I pronounce wrong, everyone will think I had the wrong intention. So I'll send that out later, right? And then item number 5 is don't get bogged down. Don't start paying attention to, if you don't know what crypto is and people are talking about it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about all these shiny things. Really focus, like we said, on the fundamentals of the real basic stuff that you know. Where is my stuff? What would embarrass me or compromise me or whatever if it became public? Where is all this stuff? And would I say my passwords are secure? Is it separated from, all that sort of stuff? So, and then lastly, don't get complacent, right? Treat what is important importantly. And I think that we all have the ability to decide that. So that's just, some of the things we can do. You want to update your password periodically. Multi-factor authentication. I'll give you an example of this that's really good. Back in the day, well, I'll say back in the day because we still do it, but going to an ATM, right? Going into an ATM means you've got a password in your head, right? You've got a PIN number in your head. You're going to walk up to the machine. You're going to put your card in and you're going to enter that PIN. And that is a way to authenticate more than once that it is who you are, because you've got the card. That's the first level of authentication. The second one is you've got a PIN in your head that you can then use. So multi-factor authentication, you've probably seen it sometimes where you log into something and they send you a PIN and they ask you to confirm. Right. So all that does is it means that if someone gets your data and tries to log into your bank or tries to log into your email, they're going to need some sort of a notification from an app or a text to verify that it's them. So MyGov does this a lot, right? So it really, really helps and avoids people just resetting your password and taking over your account, right? I would also say hackers rely on us not playing in the domain that they're not in, which means you can call and verify wherever possible. And most people understand is as soon as you say, they'll call you up and say, oh, can you please confirm that it's Jacqui? And you're like, I don't know who this is. So who are you? And they're like, oh, I can't tell you, it's for your private information. So usually at that point, I'll say, hey, okay, where are you calling from again? And they'll tell me, and then I will look up the number myself. I'll ask them what the case number is. And look, it takes 5 minutes, but also, you have the discretion between whether you're paying a fine or receiving money, or what I'm trying to say is be smart about that. But there is some scams where it looks like you're receiving and you end up paying. So just be mindful of that. I would just take the stop, especially when it's stuff that involves your personal information. That shouldn't be very common. Just take the time, call, verify, make sure it's that person. If it's a family member or an office, do that, right? Also, I talked about keeping your accounts on social media and online spending separate. So I have a separate card that I use for all my online purchases. Then I have an account with the card that stays in my house, or if I'm traveling, in my hotel, that no one has access to. It doesn't buy anything online. It is purely used for emergency or for transferring money. Keep a low footprint online just means make sure not everyone can access your personal information, right? And by that, I mean, I'm not trying to change the way people do things. Sometimes people are using social media and whatnot for other reasons, but there's a lot of people that you can go online and see their name, date of birth, birthday, where they were born, and all this information just allows someone who's into identity theft to just fill in the patches, right? So it doesn't hurt to make your stuff private. It doesn't hurt to, you know, maybe use your name and your maiden name or your middle name. All that stuff doesn't hurt. And obviously, if you're in a trusted group or that social media is part of your business, entirely different. But what I'm trying to say is make sure that someone can't easily verify personal details because you've shared them online, right? So don't use a simple password or share them across multiple websites and platforms. Now, that said, I'll qualify that. All my social media accounts that are not tied to any businesses, they can have the same account, okay? And they can have the same password, because I kind of know that I could get hacked, but there's nothing precious in there, okay? Then I would also say, if, you know, I probably have 2 or 3 accounts that are like super duper important to me. They may have the same password and the same username, but it's not shared anyway. You couldn't look it up. You couldn't take my usual email and key that in and say, let me try and hack this, right? So what I am saying is use your discretion at this. You kind of don't want to have 100 usernames and accounts for things, but try, and once you have that registry and that list, you can really start to figure out, okay, I really don't care if someone gets into my I don't know, my Facebook, but I do care if they get into my business accounts Facebook, right? So those are the things we might want to think about. And then don't click on suspicious stuff, right? Whether it's text, whether it's a WhatsApp forward, whether it's whatever. I tend to think that if someone's got really something important to me, they'll normally say, hey, Solo, I think you should check this out, which sometimes they do, but I think a group forward, you can normally tell. If your bank emails you, your bank shouldn't be emailing you with a link to reset your stuff. Just leave it as it is, and then go log in into your bank and see if you have notifications. The thing with some phishing emails or those suspicious links is they do download malware onto your machine. So malicious software, right? So like I said, most hackers can't sit there and actually figure out your password. It's finding that Trojan horse into your life. So be really mindful of those. Don't give up information to people you don't know. Someone calls you up and says, hey, before we get into this call, I need you to verify some information. I need you to verify your information. And usually it goes in a circle, but trust me, most people that are legit will actually not get mad at you. So the gentleman that called me from Finance Victoria that we spoke to, he was like, oh, mate, I understand. Here's a case number, and they'll have a process around it, right? And you do find that sometimes the banks and the government, they call you from private numbers. They call you from numbers that are not listed. So be very comfortable to do that. They're very prepared for that. The other one is don't act out of haste or fear. You'll be told that, you know, you're going to get charged tonight by Amazon. That's the most recent one I've heard. You'll be told that if you don't do this, these consequences are going to happen pretty quick. But we all know that in this, especially in Australia where everything is so safe and free, they'll send debt collectors first. You'll get a summons. There'll be something, right? No one's going to ask you to pay huge sums amount of money in a very short amount of time. In fact, even the tax office will give you a payment plan. So just look for things that try and make you act before you think. And those are major red flags. If there's haste or there's urgency or you're going to miss out on something, it feels kind of, you know, just stay away from it and investigate it. And then don't let your need to be assist be the reason you're taken advantage of. Most scammers work on that. If you call someone, you're like, hey, you know, I was wondering if you could help me out with this or that. Most people are very forthcoming. And unfortunately, it's not always the rude people that get done. It's always the people who are like, you know, willing to help, right? Willing to donate to a worthy cause. So just some stuff to think about there. So I thought at this point, we could sort of open it up to a bit more conversation. That way it's a bit more targeted. So yes.
There we go. Everyone's coming in and they can unmute themselves. And lovely Litza has given you a lovely compliment in the chat. She says, you're so engaging. You make cyber threats so easy to understand with practical tips to protect yourself.
Thank you.
Hi, Litsa.
Hi, Jack.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
That's good. Have you been getting lots of these text messages and phone calls and things like that lately?
Oh, yes. And in fact, you know, I'm sort of pretty cautious, but we've also, what's probably more dangerous is that my mother's been getting them. And a lot of those, you know, SMSs of, you know, your parcel is waiting and it's coming from DHL. And so we have put the fear of God into her, to be honest.
Yeah.
And she never touches anything. You know, we say to her, if it looks suspicious, don't touch it, ask us, you know, all of those sorts of things. But she's pretty confident with Facebook and Skype and all of those sorts of things. So we've been really diligent about telling her not to touch anything that she doesn't know the person.
Yeah. And I think that's really key. It's you know, the digital world is so confusing, and there's all these things happening all the time. People hop online, and there's NFTs, and honestly, I work in cybersecurity. I don't understand a lot of it, right? And I think when you just take it back to old school human to human interaction, that's kind of where you find that a lot of these people, they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be, you know, so that's kind of where it falls down. So I think what you've got in there for her is just perfect.
Thank you. I'll tell her that.
Yeah. Any other questions or areas that anyone wants to discuss? Yes, Gino.
Look, I'm very grateful. I think what you've said to date is probably one of the most sort of user-friendly sort of guides on how we should be acting. But in terms of, because I mean, anyone can get fooled. I mean, I got fooled the other day because I subscribed to Bunnings, and I've got their gardening special, you know, is coming out, and every other day they've got something coming. Then I got this survey in, and I thought it all looks so legitimate, you know. And after 20 minutes of, you know, lost on my time, I realized this. No one asks all this crap, you know. And they've got, have you got a mortgage? How many kids do you have?
Yeah. Especially Bunnings.
Bunnings, what are you doing? Anyway, I think your suggestion about, you know, credit cards is really important. I'm going to take that straight back to the family. But in terms of what you're seeing about trends, you know, in terms of what are you predicting, and how do you build that safety net in addition to sort of having, say, a separate card to buy online? What else would you say are the minimum protocols you should implement? Like, I know we've got virus protection on our computers and our phones, and what I mean, is there a list of standard things that we in addition to changing your passwords is there sort of like a checklist you can give your kids and say, look, this is what's happening and this is what you should be doing?
So fantastic. I'm glad you said that, Gino. And one of the things I'm hoping we can do collaboratively. So I definitely have some tips to throw out. But one of the things I was hoping, and I said this to Jacqui before, was we can build that together. And I say that because what might work for me might be very different for you, right? So there, for example, I would say, like, I have some tools maybe through work that I still have left over on my phone that I can use from time to time. Other people might not. So it's really important as we sort of go through these, that if we can create them collaboratively, then everyone can sort of look at that list and go, this applies to me, that doesn't. But yeah, so air gaps are very important. Separating out social media and stuff like that is very important. Also, not clicking on links when you're tired, half asleep, or, you know, like sometimes I'm guilty of this, where I'm about to go to bed and there's an email with an attachment. I'm like, let me open. And kind of what you said, the link is wrong. The other thing you can do sometimes is hover over the link, and you will quickly start to see that, you know, usually there's a letter dropped or there's a couple of alphabets in there. It's not quite the link. You probably would have seen that on the Bunnings bit. But look, we still have 20 minutes to go. I think after we field a few questions, we can definitely all collaboratively throw out that stuff. I will throw out some tips as well. And not all of them will be relevant to you, but I think that's where the one advantage we have over hackers is we are the experts on our personal situations, whereas they're kind of they're just looking for the weakest entry point. So does that help, Gino? So we'll
no, it does. I think everything you've said is very logical about just making it so hard that they'll go to the next person rather than have a crack at you, and sort of trying to understand the hacker in terms of their mindset helps you also protect yourself and build that sort of defense.
Yeah. And the other thing is, no matter how elaborate the scheme, no matter, they're trying to usher you through a process to get one or two things, right? So I think as long as you don't give up one of those two things, even if you get caught up in a call that goes on and you don't do it, that said, when I am bored, sometimes I'll talk to them, and after a while I'll be like, yeah, it's Victoria Police, and they hang up. So that's a bit of fun to have if you kind of want to, study them and understand a little bit better. But as long as obviously you don't give away any information.
Jim? Yeah.
Jim Dixon here.
Pleasure to meet you, Jim.
Got up one morning a few days ago, and my whole computer system was locked. I had nowhere to go.
Ouch. Yeah. And
when I eventually called in a consultant, they said a bot had got in, and they'd had to fix it. But that was $1,265 to fix that.
And where was this? Like, by that I mean, where did you go see the consultant in person, or did you have to call and they remoted into your computer?
No, I called him and he visited the home. I've had him before.
Oh, okay.
He actually set up the system, so I do know him.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly relaxed about him. But the system was completely locked, and I could go nowhere on anything. Yeah. And in fact, when I examined my actions over the previous day, there was nothing in those actions that I could isolate, because I do have what's called trend micro maximum security.
Yeah.
Which sort of guarantees to cover you for everything. But when I went back to Harvey Norman, who sold it to me as the best system, they said, well, perhaps you did something that was contrary to that, and therefore you've probably foregone the coverage.
Yeah. Look, and that's, I think that's the saddest part. The saddest part is people are happy to sell you trust and confidence. But they a lot of times, especially the big suppliers, that's what annoys me. You can go to a bricks and mortar store and buy something goes wrong, and then they point you to Microsoft in San Francisco, and you're like, whoa, I bought this from you. You told me it worked. So I'm really sorry to hear about that. One of the things that perhaps we can talk about and sort of rope in what Gino was asking, and I'm hoping that everyone can sort of just take a few notes as we go. I'll send the slides to Jacqui from today, so you folks have them if you want them. But one of the things that might help there, Jim, is I don't know if you share your computer with other family members or friends.
Oh, just my wife.
Yeah. So what can happen is, it might be, if you have the same login, I don't know if you have the same login. One thing that helps sometimes is to have an admin login, right? And admin login is the one that can install, uninstall software on your whole computer, right? And that's another way to sort of create an air gap. You have an admin login, you keep those details to yourself wherever, and then you create family member logins for everyone, right? And what that means is, unless it's a very specialized type of virus, if I get hacked, I can go into the admin page and just reset everyone. Or if my son or daughter clicks on something, or they're looking at naughty websites they shouldn't, and a bot downloads, then all that's good. But some of that stuff, like I said, it's hidden in emails. It might be an image that someone tried to open, they didn't know what was up. Sometimes they embed them in PDFs as well, which is why for me it's like, it's really important you just have a zero trust attitude. So if you don't know who someone is, and it's the first time they're reaching out to you, and you're not expecting a file from them, just don't click yet. Maybe reply them and find out what they have to say. Look at the email address. So really sorry that's happened there. But I think it's also a cautionary note that a lot of people sell product that doesn't do, and it's kind of what we were talking about. They give you the sense of confidence, you relax, and then something goes wrong. So antiviruses, they can be good. I really can't say I recommend this or another, because we don't I would say we don't really use one where we work for other reasons. But yeah, I would say I think that, you know, going back to just good old-fashioned cyber hygiene, what emails are we clicking to? The further back you go and the less you rely on tools, the better off I think you are.
I really like that advice, actually, about having an admin login. Like, I use my MacBook for everything and I am the admin on it. So I should probably have a separate one that I log into for all my social medias and maybe a separate one for work.
Yeah. And that's the other beautiful thing, Jim, is you can set permissions on those. You can have such that, you know, profiles can only read, write, surf the net. They can't download anything. So, you know, if that is the computer that has your valuables and your work and so forth, because the other thing is, I'm guessing you had that computer replaced because it was valuable to you, in that when you look at that price, you know, you might have maybe bought another one. But I think that's the thing. The problem is some of that data is very hard to recover. The other thing that
fortunate thing is that what I've been doing is transferring all my essential data to what do you call them when you stick things into your side of your
to a hard drive. Yep.
A hard drive. And what I've done is I type in all the information to those, and at the end of the day, I make sure I pull them out of that. And so that was the way that, unfortunately, I was able to retain all of what I thought were the essential bits of information about me.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And to just what Gina was saying today before, that's something that I would add to my list of checklist of things to do, just to make sure that important machines are backed up. Because what that means is Jim had the option between buying a new machine or getting the other one reformatted. Now, the only thing I would say, Jim, and I'm not saying this to you know, in any other way, but to say you use the consultant that you trust, and that's great. But usually, if a machine gets compromised like that, do think about just getting a new one and then unpacking up your data. But the thing to check as well is you might want to make sure someone can scan that data and make sure that the problem is not in the data. The other thing I just really wanted to talk about real quick while you were saying that, Jim, was for everybody else, one thing is not to enter, this is not for Jim's case, but if you pick up a USB you don't know, do not stick that in your computer. So that is famously, you can look it up, it's called Stuxnet, STUXNET. That is literally how the US curtailed at some point Iran's nuclear program. They literally had someone run over to the nuclear site and threw a USB over the fence, and you can guess what happened. That person, you can look it up, the CIA did this. That person took that little USB, went to see what was in it. There's a bunch of random files, they took them out. And what this worm would do is it would change all the measurements by milliliters. So they had years of just failing to get the nuclear program going. So that's kind of what I mean. It's little things like that. So just on the back of that, Jim, if it's your hard drive, by all means, back up and save it. But just as a tip, something to avoid there. So just real quick, Gina, how many tips would you say we have there? And for everyone else, like how many are we looking at getting? I'm happy for us to sort of focus on that while we answer the questions as well. And
I'm up to 7 now.
Okay, well, what do you have there? Just so we can share that quick.
My favorite ones were create an admin login for your shared computers, which restricts access to adding new software.
Yep.
Zero trust attitude. If tired, don't click on links. You can hover over them, see if it brings anything up. I like create air gaps between social media and your financials.
Yep.
5 was separate your credit cards for online purchase. 6 was back up your system regularly and scan data if you're concerned. 7 was never trust unknown USBs.
Yep.
That's where I'm at.
Got it. Anyone else pick up anything different? Jim, do you have any tips or thoughts?
Well, I mean, the one I put in was, in fact, to put critical information on your own USB and make sure you pull that out of the computer at the end of each night. And so therefore you can't be hacked into that.
Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing, wherever you put that information, to just be really careful of it. Like, for example, you lose that USB and so forth. But yeah, I think that's really important that, if you can have physical copies of something saved somewhere, that helps. There are also programs that will help you back up your machine. I know Apple has a time capsule built in where you can just roll it back. So if someone put a bot on your machine today and you're able to reset it, you can roll it back to last week, for example.
And one bit of advice that you gave was to clean up your machine. And what my consultant did was virtually wipe my computer clean and then reinstalled Microsoft Office, Windows 11, etc. So I've now got a complete new system, and what I had beforehand has been completely wiped from what.
Beautiful. That's good. The other thing that we have, and once again, I'm not recommending this as something for everybody to do. I'm only saying this and that everybody should really assess what's the cost versus the benefit, right? As you do these things, you want to make sure that you're still being practical. But we use a VPN at work. Now, I don't use VPN all the time, but a VPN is simply a virtual private network. So what that means is a lot of people use them to watch movies from overseas countries and stuff. But even if you're doing work and you're surfing the internet, all it does is it masks your IP, right? So if there's someone with a bot and a dodgy connection trying to do whatever, they're not going to be able to get the address of your computer as it is. Now, that said, the reason I was saying that's something to be mindful of is if we kind of go from the family situation to the business situation, that's something that we have for our business and the team that we have. So I'm able to use that at home as well.
And how do you do that?
So a virtual private network is just something to look up. I would recommend, though, Jim, is I don't make specific product recommendations, but a corporate virtual product network, a virtual private network for corporates. What it does is, so if I was to, so if I log into my computer and I turn that on, periodically, it's just masking where I'm entering from. Now, what is annoying is even on our website, sometimes when you look at the stats, people have used a VPN and one day they're in Israel, the next day they're in Japan, but it does offer you a bit of anonymity surfing online, if that makes sense.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, all good.
Another thing on your checklist to put down will be two-factor authentication where we can.
Yep. That's a good one. And then let's any thoughts or tips that you use for yourself?
I've actually used a system of software called LastPass.
Yes, that's good. Yep.
So I use that, and then I use very long passwords that are completely different. Because I have had an email that has been used. I'm not going to use that word that you don't want to use either. Because people might misunderstand.
Yep.
So an old password has been compromised, and it keeps on coming up, and I can see it keeps on coming up. So I moved to both multi-factor authentication and also using sort of very complex random passwords, but I use LastPass to store everything in.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And what I would say to everyone is LastPass, there's a couple of these things. They're called password managers. So make sure that you, once again, I'm very big on get reviews online. Don't click on, go to a reputable source, but there's a few out there that are really good. But what they allow you to do is for all the things that you use. So I use mine just for work. So all my work stuff's on there, not my personal stuff. So every time I've got a new password to update, it'll generate a password and it'll save it. So from a work perspective, for me, that's good. The one thing I want everyone to remember, though, is should that app, if you put all your eggs in one basket, watch that basket very closely. So that's why she's got a really complex password. And that's to make sure if someone gets into that, they've got everything, right? So just something to think about there. That said, I do know that some of them will give you a way to back up your account and to reset it if it goes out of way. I'm sure it's a bit like that with you too there, Lisa. But the other
I need to check that.
yeah, so do check that. There should be a backup way, otherwise you're just locked out. But the other thing I think you brought up that's really important that everyone should have as a tip is complex passwords, right? So if you're using a password generator, it will give you a complex password. The only thing is you have no way in hell of remembering that should you not, yeah. So one of the things that I use sometimes, especially on those personal things I don't want to put into a password manager, is use a sentence that you love. It could be a phrase, it could be a saying. Just remove all the vowels or remove all of one letter. Right, that's much harder to guess than maybe Demons 99 if they won the cup in 99. So that way, if you kind of use maybe a phrase, saying your granddad used to say, and you kind of drop the N's or you drop the O's and you add a number to it, you're good to go. The other thing to think about is kind of be a teenager again and take a word and then replace, I don't know, like I with an upside down exclamation mark, sorry, with an exclamation mark, replace S with a dollar sign, something like that, something that, is not necessarily quickly spelt. That also works really well, as long as you can remember that sequence. So good points there, Litsa. I like how you boxed a few into one.
Thank you.
And it's happening live while we're on here. I've had a text message. A generous welcome pack awaits you. Click the link.
Very generous for them, right? So, and then the other thing I think we talked about is to really think about, and I'll put this in my checklist, Gino, is do I have a plan for if I get hacked? So in the cyberspace, we say there's two kind of people. There's people who have been hacked and people who don't know they've been hacked. And by that, I'm saying if you were to go back and to look at that list of things, I can guarantee you, just like you said, you found out at some point there's been a data spill. At some point there's been phishing links I've clicked on by mistake and kind of gone unwind. So it's really important that you also have a plan for the worst case scenario. Sorry, what was that?
Talking about plans and getting hacked, I mean, I can relate the experience of my wife getting hacked one night and she couldn't reach me, and then the Apple image came up and then the call came in saying your screen's frozen, so contact this number. So then she rang India and they said, look, you've been hacked, pay $60 and we'll download this particular software to protect you. So by the time I got out of only 1 hour of the day, it was blocked, my phone. Yep. By the time I rang, she says, oh, it's all done. I've rung, they're download. I said, pull the socket out of the plug.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, but is there a plan that I can give them in future? Like if this happens, press the self-destruct button or pull the plug, or what are the, I mean, what you say you need a plan. Mm-hmm. For most people, there's a fire. You've got the, the stairs, the fire stairs. Now, is there sort of, apart from pulling the plug, if they're still downloading?
Yeah. So look, I think that's a kind of a hard one because they're in the middle of the thing, right? So the problem with that scam, and the other part that you reminded me of just as you're talking is there's a wise man, I think his name is Charlie Munger. He's a big American investor. He's actually advisor to Warren Buffett. And his saying is, if you know where you're going to die, just stay the hell away from there, right? So I think, as you were speaking, one of the things that I've done in my spare time, and just because I'm at Aiculus, I watch scammer videos on YouTube, right? I watch because I know the scam now, and there's plenty. There's what you were describing there, Gino, is it happens so often. So the way they actually do it is you might be surfing, and if you click on a certain website or whatever, the other thing is they send all these things online. A pop-up comes up, and that pop-up looks official, but it's not. Right? I'm sure you guys have seen it. Sometimes you're surfing, a pop-up comes up, and it's exactly what you described. It says Apple logo, this and that. Then they ask you to download something, which when you do, that's when they get the bot onto your machine, right? So there'll be a number there you call. It'll be, hi, you've called Microsoft India. We'll fix this for you. So once they've got that on your machine, they then pretend to do the work. And then they say, do a transfer. And then when you do the transfer, and tell me if this is what happened, Gino, when you do the transfer, they do some funny stuff where they show you a different screen. Then they'll tell you that then they'll say something like they've sent you too much money back, something like that. And then
no, they didn't get there. They took the $60 for the initial download.
Okay.
And then I got home.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
And then I rang them back
And
about 5 times.
they didn't answer, did they?
Yeah, they did, because it's a legit operation where they say this is a software. They set themselves up in India in some underground system, and so then I proceeded to call them every night of the week for the next week, ordering Indian food and swearing at them in Italian. So,
oh man, but yeah, honestly, if you hop on YouTube, there is actually a guy. There's a couple of guys who spend all their time stinging these guys. There's another guy who actually, when they call, he hacks into their computers and then he shows them their own webcams, right? So no, but once you watch these a few times, I swear you'll realize the scam back to front. So there's actually a lot of people on YouTube who show you how to beat these scammers. So if you just go, getting scammers back on YouTube. Now that said, don't do that when you've got important work to do. It's a rabbit hole. It's fascinating, right? So I guess what I would say is just to that, just understanding as you think about your plan, understanding the scams that might apply to you. Right. But to your other point there, Gino, I think if something is happening inbound, so look, if it's a desktop and you connect it from the power, that'll kill the power. That's great. I think if it's a laptop, just to make sure that you are switching it off and that connection is terminating. And then when you come out of that, you are changing your passwords and so forth. But I think what's good is, for example, if you are admin on that computer, Gino, this is why I love, having your list. If you are admin on that computer, you'll avoid a whole bunch of things. Yeah. Right? Because if you've got a plan as a unit, then you're able to say, hey, you've all spoken about it. Any calls like that, we don't respond till we've spoken, blah, blah, blah. Because I can guarantee you, if your computer's down, it doesn't need to necessarily be up in 5 minutes. You can just take it in a couple of days, right? So, yeah, that's where I think a lot of the stuff we've talking about here helps prevent some of that stuff.
You're wonderful as always, Solo. You're so engaging and practical.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any last questions?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. It was a great presentation and kept me interested, which takes a lot, particularly at this time of the night.
Yeah. But thank you guys for the interest. I think that I'll ask Gino real quick to go through the list, but also Gino, if you don't mind, I mean, it'll be on the recording so people can take notes. If you don't mind, maybe sharing that with Jacqui as well. I think we could turn that into a nice TBA cybersecurity checklist for your clients.
Yep, I'll type it up and send it over.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep, great idea. And for those listening to the recording, by all means, email me and I'll send you the checklist.
Cheers. And thank you, everyone. Please stay safe out there. I think cyber can be overwhelming, but you only need to know what's relevant to you, which I think puts us at great advantage. Right?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.